Hello Namibia, and welcome to your daily lunchtime show where we get to catch up on current events and headlines that are in the news. My name is Priska Anyolo and you are watching NMH at 1. So let us first have a look at the incoming news this morning. Unbeknown to most people, Namibia will see the return of the formal World Press Freedom Day on the 3rd of May in 2021. 30 years after the same event took place in Windhoek shortly after independence. The Windhoek Declaration for the Development of a Free, Independent and Pluralistic Press was born in our country and is a statement of press freedom principles by African newspaper journalists in 1991. The declaration was produced at a UNESCO seminar promoting an independent and pluralistic African press that was held in Windhoek from the 29th of April to the 3rd of May in 1991. The date of the declaration's adoption, the 3rd of May, was subsequently declared as World Press Freedom Day. And the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism, MEFT, is rehabilitating parts of the road network in the Etosha National Park in an effort to attract tourists and tour operators that have been shunning the park because of its badly damaged roads. Environment, Forestry and Tourism Minister Pohamba Shifeta, during a site visit to the park on Wednesday, said that about 190 kilometers of the Etosha road network will be rehabilitated, adding that most of the car rentals, tour operators and guides had cancelled their bookings to Namibia's prime tourist destination due to the damaged roads, which have seen the state losing millions in state revenue. And now we move on to our COVID-19 update. As regards to COVID-19 news, we would like to update you as follows. By Tuesday, only 267 people were still accommodated in Namibia's official quarantine facilities. Over the last 2 days, 43 entries were recorded and 141 exits. The details per region are still awaited. Our map shows data per region for the period from Tuesday, the 3rd of November to Sunday, the 8th of November, when the national total still stood at 365 quarantine cases. Over these 6 days, 320 individuals entered quarantine, while 460 were discharged. The largest intake was in the Oshikoto region, where the 149 entries were, however, matched by the same number of exits. In Khababis, 132 people were discharged, with 81 new admissions. Moving on, groups of more than 40 people were also allowed to return home in the Irongo and Zambezi regions. By Sunday, the quarantine facilities in the Osho-Danjupa region were empty following the discharge of 58 persons. Those under quarantine in the Kavango and Karas regions were already under supervision for 12 and 14 days respectively. Some of these individuals may have been discharged since. And that is it for our COVID-19 news.
What's happening, everybody?
As always, next we bring you video news clips from around the country. In our so-called WE moment for the week, we bring you a video clip that was submitted by Jurin Bueta of the Windhoek Express. Here you can witness the reopening of the Windhoek Museum.
The Windhoek City Museum was officially opened by founding President Sam Nujoma last week. At the event, Nujoma thanked the Municipal Council for creating the museum to preserve the capital's rich cultural heritage. At the same event, Windhoek Mayor Francina Kahungu said that the building housing the City Museum was constructed between 1907 and 1908, and that Count Georg von Stilfried und Ratonitz was the first person to live there. He was an officer who served with General Lothar von Trotha against the Ovaherero forces of Samuel Mahirero at the Battle of Ahumakari on 11 August 1904. Ratonitz was sent back to Germany on sick leave after the battle. Kahungu added that the museum will also create a platform for residents to give their own account of the history of Windhoek. As a historical building, the City Museum is protected by the National Heritage Council of Namibia. The museum is located on the corner of Robert Mugabe and Schwerensburg Street, and it is open on weekdays from 7:30 to 4:30. On Saturdays, the museum opens from 8 to 1. It is closed on Sundays and public holidays.
Esther Kamati has recorded Rian van die Kerk, who tells us of his plans to transform the old Etosha Hotel into a retirement village. Do have a look.
Hello, I'm Rian van die Kerk. I'm from Etosha Hotel. We're busy changing Etosha Hotel into retirement estate. During the COVID lockdown, with all the tourists gone, we decided to change it into a retirement estate. We're building 15, the existing rooms, we're changing into bachelor flats. That'll be 15 bachelor flats. And then we're building 12 one-bedroom houses, complete houses with garage, and another 18 two-bedroom houses, complete with garage. We started with a bachelor flat already. We're close to finishing it for show purposes, and then we're building 2 one-bedroom flats, houses to also for show. The wall right around it, the property with electric fencing. Going to be security guards at the gate, so it's going to be quite safe for everybody to stay here.
And for our last video insert for today, Jareen Hoff brings us another clip of a talk she had with Ilke Platt of Poya Media.
Good afternoon everybody and welcome to NMH at 1. Today I'm speaking to Ilke Platt of Poya Media and we're celebrating 1,000 days. Thank you, Jareen. 1,000 days. I've heard so often in business, failure or success is based on 1,000 days and 1,000 steps.
Yes.
What has happened in these 1,000 days?
Jareen, you need to take a whole weekend off with me to understand where we've been up until here. And I think we've just started. You know, you can never say that you've learned enough, you've been there, you've done that, because every day it's a new thing to learn. But marking statistically after 1,000 days, you're doing something right.
That's awesome news. Okay, what has happened in these last 1,000 days? What are highlights for you?
Our recent highlight is securing, after 1,000 days, I kid you not, our first major corporate. And if you feel that you need to be big within the first month, the first week, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, we just discussed the behind the scenes. I've been in the industry for 18 years, broadcasting, corporate 10 years. But when you're an entrepreneur, things are from scratch. It's basically as new. Not as much as proving yourself in the boardroom, but you really need to be strategic. You need to know your network. You need to know how do you spend your time with what, and not just being busy, but not also bringing that income. So the highlight number one, getting our first major corporate after a whole 1,000 days. It's a blessing in disguise. Another highlight would be the mentorship, internship throughout the whole journey. I think being able to see interns that now have a full-time job more than 80% of interns can now, I can comfortably say, have a full-time paying job at the end of the day.
And I think you just said in the media release recently that you had more than 100 applications.
Yes, so it's really sought after. And when we go through the whole, shortlist candidates, you've seen, our top 4 now, it's vigorous, it's competitive, and we see the need for practical experience. I think in this day and age, we always want to get paid, I need to get paid to do internship. When I started 18 years ago on radio, I didn't get paid for anything that I did. But you know what? It paid off because I could graduate at the end of the day and then start getting myself up the corporate ladder slowly but surely.
I love that. You didn't get paid off.
Yeah.
That's just fantastic. And then last year you won an award.
Oh yes, Global Startup Award. So nationally and regionally. So in Namibia, it's done annually. Global Startup Awards, you're nominated. So even when the nomination came through, we were surprised. And it's good because people recognize your work without you submitting yourself to be a nominee. Number 2, yes, we competed against SA, Mozambique, and the whole, SADC. But at least we were in the same company and on the same table and placing Namibia on the map. I think it's always, that credibility that grants you access to also corporates and to open up that door a bit more for you, not under your private brand, but under Koya Media.
And you know what about brand building? I mean, you've been doing it for 18 years. And you started on radio.
Yes! UNAM radio, oh my gosh, even television, and then doing film and acting, and then doing music. And Jerry, we come a long way, and I admire your career as well. But you know what? Even if you feel sometimes that it doesn't pay off, I think passion would still remain number 1. I have a brand, and I'm able to fulfill my passion and still bring in an income at the end of the day.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Now we can just do photos.
Okay, cool. Looking at the front pages of various Namibian papers today, we see that the Algemeine Zeitung leads with an interesting intervention by the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, which joins forces with the Ministry of Sport, Youth and National Service. With the financial aid provided by the German development agency GIZ, these ministries are embarking on a reintroduction of sport at a national level in all schools. Over the years, there has been a gradual migration to sport clubs and associations, but not all children can afford that. So this introduction is a much-needed initiative aiming at keeping kids busy and fit, which in the end benefits their minds as well. Republican on its page 1 reports that 6 parties submitted tenders for the purpose of being allowed to manage the Namibian government's medical aid scheme, CMAS. CMAS has repeatedly been subjected to criticism on account of poor management, which has led to abuse and thus tremendous state subsidies, which are made at the cost of the rest of the Namibian taxpayers. Prime Health Namibia, the current manager, has also submitted an offer. The Namibian Sun leads with the current upheaval surrounding the appointment of a new prosecutor general. The incumbent PG, Martha Emalwa, as well as FNB senior legal advisor Tazwell July and the fiery SWAPO party's Ruth Herunga are in contention for this job. Herunga being considered as a candidate has caused massive uproar as she is considered to be too close to the ruling party that is embroiled in the fish rot scandal. The public further does not seem to approve of Herunga as she has been appointed, among others, as temporary board member of the parastatal company Fishcore, which has been abused as conduit for the financial corruption that surrounds the whole Fishcore saga. The Namibian leads with a serious dispute between the board and the management of the National Fishing Corporation of Namibia, in short, Fishcore.
it needs to be remembered that management is naturally under scrutiny after Fish Corp's previous CEO Mike Kipunya and former chairman of the board of directors James Hatukulipi were both arrested for the role that they played in the Fish Corp corruption scandal. It now seems as though the temporary board under the leadership of Mihe Khaumap II is introducing tight controls which management regards as a stifling environment. New Era on its front page leads with the current dispute about the intent to ultimately frack for oil in the Kavango regions. It seems to be an increasing concern among the local population now that Canadian firm Reconnaissance Energy Africa has been given the go-ahead to conduct detailed oil and gas exploration assessments in one of Namibia's most vulnerable ecological regions and tourism destinations. And now we move on to the inside pages of the country's newspapers, and you'll be able to see the following. Allgemeine Zeitung carries a report about the fact that the Roads Authority has announced a whopping 42% increase in the road user charges. This is a massive increase of this indirect tax at a time when society still needs to get to grips with the aftermath of COVID-19, and especially if considering that the current inflation rate sits at 2.4%. What puts a question mark next to the need to increase this tax right now is the fact that the Road Fund Administration still lauded our roads as recently as June 2020, when Namibia was supposed to have been announced as having the best road infrastructure in Africa for the fourth year in a row. Why the maintenance costs should then increase so drastically in such a difficult time remains a mystery. The Republican newspaper on its page 3 provides an insight into the life of Matthijs van Rooyen, who used to be a Namibian rugby player and well-liked trainer and in fact a teacher. He suffers from motor neuron disease. Some of you may remember that the brilliant man Stephen Hawkins and closer to home, the South African rugby player Joost van der Westhuizen also suffered from this rare disease. On its page 3, the Namibian Sun has an interesting report about the fact that 40 people have died of malaria in Namibia during 2020. To bring this into context, only 29 people have died of COVID-19, which raises the question whether we as a country are awarding our attention to the most pressing issues, or are we simply following the mainstream of the world? The Namibian reports on its page 3 that the access to services and proper home care remains a serious challenge for many old people who cannot afford an old age home. It seems as though that circumstance is now becoming a political issue during the coming elections. And that is it for our newspaper reviews for today. We're going to go for a quick ad break, but we'll be right back with our interview section for the day. During our interview slot today, we bring you an interview that we have aired over our recently introduced morning show called Africa Good Morning. In that show, we air voices and news from Africa brought to you from the horse's mouth. We make use of African journalists outside of the Namibian sphere, and we literally have our announcers phoning in to speak to their colleagues throughout Africa. You can tune into Africa Good Morning every weekday at 7 o'clock, as well as on the Namibian Sun's Facebook page. Now, gender-based violence remains a hot topic in Namibia, while clearly also being an issue in many other African states. In this morning's episode of Africa Good Morning, Henning Melba shared his views on the root causes of this problem. He was interviewed by Ashwin Berry.
Since early October, hundreds of furious demonstrators have taken to the streets of Namibia in protest against gender-based violence and femicide, triggered by a series of gruesome assaults on women and girls. Namibian Henning Melba, an extraordinary professor at the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria and senior research associate at the Nordic Africa Institute, looked into the matter and joins us in the studio. Hi, Professor, how are you?
I'm fine, Ashwin. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here, Professor. I'll go straight into your first question. You say that toxic masculinity has torn apart a social fabric that would allow the protesting women to live without fear. Please elaborate.
Well, first of all, it's the women themselves who articulate these fears. And we have to take these fears serious because they are based on their daily experiences in Namibian society. And everyone who follows the media reports can see the extreme degree of mutilation of the female bodies, which happen as a daily occurrence, from babies to grandmothers. Rape, domestic violence, physical and mental harm. And a particular example, which I find shocking as a misnomer, are the so-called passion killings. Because they claim that men, which are usually the perpetrators, kill in gruesome ways. They are part of those women they feel betrayed of, and then trying to take their own lives. That has nothing to do with passion. That is toxic masculinity. It's aggression and self-aggression, and it destroys a social fabric.
That's very true indeed, Professor. That is very true. It has been reflected in society. We see that once you use such a narrative as passion killing, people also don't really get to the core of what it means. It almost feels like a blanket that allows people, or in their mind at least, allows them to do such gruesome things. Now, lawmakers tend to stress that in this case, Namibia's legal system provides a robust framework to combat gender-based violence and sexual discrimination. Is that true in reality?
It's partly true if you look at some of the elements in the legal framework, but there is a huge discrepancy.
Since early October, hundreds
The legal framework, but there is a huge discrepancy, as we again can witness. There is a selective prosecution in reality when it comes to cases of rape, which are recorded. The police is often dismissive in the pursuance of these cases, and there is a high degree of unknown cases because women do not want to go through this humiliating process of being questioned if their claims are correct. So we have to assume that because of these social realities, women are denied a fair treatment of their complaints. We also have discrepancies in the salary structures, in the services. Women are less paid than men, which is a form of discrimination. Labor laws, to my knowledge, have not ironed that out. There is also a lot of talk of rigorous implementation, but it hardly is followed by the actions. Let's keep in mind that the reproductive rights, which Namibian delegation endorsed in the global conferences in Cairo and in Beijing, are not fully employed in Namibia. Abortion laws are extremely strict, and only a few days ago, the Deputy Prime Minister recalled or announced that sex education is withdrawn in schools, which is again actually a step back instead of a step forward. If we have child pregnancies and half of them unwanted, then you do not abandon sex education in schools, but you actually reinforce sex education.
Indeed, Professor. And you know, it's wonderful to be able to talk to you with regards to this subject because you have been involved for years and years, and this information is so important to disseminate to the general public and people keeping eyes on the government to see if they're following up their words with actions. Now, the third question almost kind of mirrors the second one. It's our last question, and it goes like this: to which extent has Namibia and SADC succeeded in making a progressive shift in gender politics?
Well, Namibia is at the forefront of claiming that they have almost achieved gender equality in the political sphere, which applies to the National Assembly with the CEPRA regulation of the dominant party. And the recent cabinet appointments also reflect a huge increase in gender balance. Now, that is an empirical fact, but it has not translated into more gender-based awareness, because many of those women in higher ranking political positions are a product of a male-dominated discourse and socialization. They have internalized male chauvinist values. The Deputy Prime Minister's cancellation of sex education is just one of the recent examples. Or take the unfortunate figurative speech, and we have a lot of examples of unfortunate figurative speech these days, of the Minister for Gender Equality comparing the male genitals with an AK-47. That is male chauvinist language by a woman, I'm sorry to say. Now, on the positive side, we have a few role models, and I would like to mention the First Lady of Namibia, who actually represents a different approach. And I think that needs to deserve recognition and praise. And we have, as far as I could see, watching the footage on the demonstrations, a growing number of Namibian men, and I dare to include you, Ashwin, who are aware and who reposition themselves, who realize that they only are as emancipated as the women are. And if women are discriminated, men are not emancipated. So they be caring fathers. They might pass on new values to their offspring, including especially the boys. And that's my wish and hope for the future. But at the moment, it will remain a little better.
Truly, and you know, because it has been a conversation that hasn't been at the forefront for the longest time. You know, men like myself and you are constantly in this space where we need to be unlearning our internalized misogyny and, you know, how we benefit from this patriarchal system and see if we can create an equal Africa and indeed an equal world for all, where women get the same rights and privileges as everyone else. Professor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Ashwin, and thank you to all the listeners who are taking that serious.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of today's Lunchtime Show. We look forward to engaging with you again tomorrow. And I've been your host, Priska Anyolo. And thank you so much for watching and supporting us here on NMH at 1. Please do join us again tomorrow, same time, same place. And do stay tuned for a quick snapshot of the weather as well. Goodbye, Namibia.